Welcome to English Stories Journey. Listen, relax, and grow your English with every story. There was once a man named Daniel Marsh. He lived in a small town near the desert, where the sky was always wide and open. Every evening, when other people were watching television or drinking coffee, Daniel sat outside his house and looked up. The stars were his friends, and the clouds were his dreams. Daniel was not a pilot, not a scientist, and not rich. He was just an ordinary man who worked at a hardware store. But inside him lived an extraordinary wish, a dream to fly. Ever since he was a child, he wanted to rise above the ground, to feel the wind on his face, and to look down at the world like a bird. When he was young, Daniel built paper airplanes and imagined they were real. Later, when he grew up, he sometimes visited the local airport just to watch planes take off. He listened to the sound of engines and smiled. But flying lessons were expensive, and he could never afford them. Still, the dream never left him. It waited, quiet but alive, somewhere deep inside. One hot afternoon, Daniel was walking home from work. In the park, a group of children were laughing and running with colorful helium balloons in their hands. The balloons floated in the bright blue sky, moving gently with the wind. Daniel stopped and stared. The colors reflected in his eyes, red, yellow, green, blue, like tiny planets. Suddenly, a wild thought came to his mind. If one balloon can lift a child's dream, what if I had 100 or 1,000? Could they lift me? He laughed at the idea, but the thought stayed. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the balloons, about flying, about freedom. It sounded impossible, but also wonderful. The next day, Daniel went to the library and read about helium. He learned that it was lighter than air. He calculated and wrote on a piece of paper, if one balloon can lift 14 grams. He started doing small experiments in his backyard. He tied balloons to apples, books, even to his cat's toy. Not the cat itself, of course. Every time, he smiled like a child. His neighbors thought he was strange. "Daniel, what are you doing?" asked Mrs. Peters, the old lady next door. "Just testing something," Daniel answered with a secret smile. She shook her head. "You and your crazy ideas." But Daniel didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. Every evening after work, he bought more balloons. Red ones, blue ones, big and small. His house soon looked like a toy shop. He even built a special chair, a strong garden chair with ropes and hooks. He imagined sitting in it, holding a small radio, and floating high above his town. The image in his mind was so real that he could almost feel the wind on his face. Sometimes he doubted himself. "What if I fall? What if people laugh at me?" he thought. But another voice whispered, "What if you really fly?" That voice was louder. One evening, Daniel went to the highest hill near his town. The sun was going down, painting the sky with gold and orange. He sat there and watched the horizon. The air was still and quiet. He took a deep breath and said softly, "I'm going to do it. I will fly. Not in a plane, but with balloons." The words felt strange but powerful. His heart was beating fast, as if it already knew the adventure had begun. When he returned home, he started making a list. Helium tanks, 2. Rope, 50 meters. Balloons, as many as possible. He smiled as he wrote the last line. Courage, one big heart. That night, Daniel dreamed of the sky again. In his dream, he was flying over mountains and rivers. The world below looked small and peaceful. He woke up before sunrise, his heart full of energy. The morning was cool and quiet. The first birds were singing outside. He whispered to himself, "Maybe tomorrow I will start. Maybe tomorrow the dream will finally become real." The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside was pink and quiet. He looked out of the window and whispered, "Today I start my dream." He made a big cup of coffee and opened his notebook. On the first page he wrote in large letters, "Project SKYMAN." Daniel wasn't a scientist or an engineer, but he was careful and patient. He knew he had to plan everything. He needed hundreds of helium balloons, a strong chair, long ropes, and courage, a lot of courage. First, he went to a local balloon shop. The shopkeeper, a young woman with a red ponytail, looked surprised when Daniel asked, "How many balloons can you sell me?" "Well," she said slowly, "how many do you need?" He smiled. "Maybe 500? She laughed. "500? Are you opening a circus?" "Something like that," answered Daniel. "Something that will fly." She thought he was joking, but when Daniel started paying and returning again and again, she began to wonder. Every few days he came with his old car and took home dozens of colorful balloons. Soon his garage was full of them, yellow, red, blue, silver. They covered the ceiling and moved softly with the air. It looked like a rainbow had landed inside his house. But balloons were only the beginning. Daniel also bought 2 helium tanks from a store in the city. The seller warned him, "This is not a toy, sir. Be careful with it." Daniel nodded. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Inside, he wasn't completely sure, but his heart was stronger than his doubts. At night, Daniel worked quietly in his backyard. He tied ropes, tested the strength of knots, and tried to calculate how much helium he needed. Sometimes the neighbors watched from their windows. Mrs. Peters, the old lady next door, called to him one evening. "Daniel, what is all this nonsense?" He looked up and smiled. "It's not nonsense, Mrs. Peters. It's a dream." She laughed. "Dreams don't need balloons, dear. They need sense." But Daniel just kept working. The nights were cool, and the moon watched him like a silver eye. He was tired, but every balloon he tied made him feel one step closer to the sky. One weekend, Daniel invited his friend Mike to help. Mike was a truck driver, a big man with a loud voice. When he saw the balloons, he said, "Dan, are you serious? You're going to fly in a chair?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, I've tested the lift. It can work." Mike laughed so hard he almost cried. "You'll be famous, man, either as a genius or a crazy fool." Daniel smiled. "Maybe both." They spent all day filling balloons with helium. The sound of gas escaping filled the air, "Sss, sss," like snakes whispering. The balloons floated and danced above them. When the sun went down, the backyard looked magical. Hundreds of balloons shone in the evening light, like stars waiting for night. Daniel stood under them, his face bright with excitement. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I will try." That night Daniel couldn't sleep again. His mind was full of pictures, the town below, the wind, the open sky. He was afraid, yes, but it was a good kind of fear, the kind that means something great is coming. Before dawn, he packed his backpack. Inside were a small radio, a bottle of water, a sandwich, and a pair of binoculars. He checked the ropes again and made sure his chair was strong. When the first light touched the sky, Daniel stood in his backyard surrounded by silence. Only the balloons moved gently, waiting. Mike came over, still half asleep. "Dan, you sure about this?" Daniel nodded. "I was born ready." "Then let's make history," Mike said, shaking his head with a smile. Together they untied the last rope that held the balloons down. The chair trembled. The balloons pulled harder and harder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, gently, the chair began to rise. Daniel felt the ground move away beneath his feet. His heart jumped. He laughed, a real, loud, happy laugh. Daniel was flying. The earth below him was growing smaller and smaller. The houses looked like matchboxes, the cars like little toys moving slowly on tiny roads. The early morning sun painted everything gold, and the air was fresh and light. He couldn't stop smiling. For a moment he forgot all his fear. The sound of the wind filled his ears, and the balloons above him shone brightly in the sunlight, red, yellow, blue, silver, hundreds of them, dancing together in the sky. "Unbelievable," Daniel whispered. "I'm really doing it." Down on the ground, his friend Mike was running after him, shouting and waving his arms, but Daniel could only hear a faint echo. He waved back and laughed. The ropes creaked softly as the chair climbed higher and higher. Soon he could see the whole town spread out below, the park, the river, and even the small hardware store where he worked. It looked so quiet and peaceful from up there. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt completely free. He took the binoculars from his bag and looked around. To the west, the mountains looked blue and far away. To the east, the desert shone like a golden sea. The world seemed endless. But then he noticed something. The wind was stronger up here. It pushed him toward the desert. Daniel frowned. That wasn't the direction he had planned. He took the small radio from his pocket and tried to call Mike. "Mike, can you hear me?" he said. Only silence answered. He tried again, but the radio only made a soft, crackling sound. "Okay," Daniel said to himself. "I'll be fine. I just have to stay calm." The chair moved gently, like a boat on invisible waves. The balloons pulled, the ropes stretched, and Daniel's heart beat fast with excitement. Below him, the fields passed slowly, then a small forest. He could see a group of people standing outside a farm looking up and pointing. Some of them took photos with their phones. Daniel waved to them, laughing. He had dreamed of this moment for years, the quiet, the height, the beauty. The clouds were near now, soft and white. He reached out his hand as if he could touch them. But as he rose higher, the air became colder. He shivered. The wind grew stronger, and his chair began to shake. The ropes made a strange sound. Daniel looked up. One of the balloons was losing air. It wasn't dangerous yet, but it made him nervous. "Don't panic," he whispered. "Just keep going." He checked the ropes again and held the sides of his chair tightly. The ground was far below now, maybe 1,000 meters. His stomach felt light, and for a moment fear replaced his joy. Then he remembered why he was there. "You wanted to fly," he told himself. "Now you're flying. Enjoy it." He looked up again at the sea of balloons above him. They were still beautiful, hundreds of bright circles floating together against the deep blue sky. The view was too amazing to stay afraid. Minutes passed. The wind carried him farther and farther. He could no longer see the town, only the endless desert below. The sand looked like waves frozen in time. Then, suddenly, he heard a sound, a bird's cry. He looked up and saw a group of white birds flying near him. For a few seconds, they moved beside his balloons, their wings shining in the sunlight. It was the most magical moment of his life. He felt like one of them, free and light. He laughed and waved, and the birds turned away, disappearing into the clouds. But the joy didn't last long. A strong gust of wind hit the balloons. The chair moved sharply to the side. Daniel grabbed the ropes. His heart raced. The balloons were pulling in different directions. "Whoa!" he shouted. "Easy, easy!" He tried to stabilize the chair, but the wind kept changing. The sky, which looked so calm a few minutes ago, was now wild and restless. Clouds began to gather above him. The radio crackled again for a moment, Mike's voice distant and broken. "Dan, come down! Too high! Wind!" Then the sound disappeared. Daniel looked down. The desert stretched endlessly beneath him. He felt both amazed and afraid. The adventure was no longer a dream, it was real, and the sky was not always friendly. He took a deep breath and whispered, "All right, Sky, if this is the game, I'm ready to play." And as he said it, lightning flashed far away on the horizon. The adventure was about to become dangerous. Bright morning had changed into a wild gray sky. Clouds moved fast, heavy and dark, hiding the sun. The wind was no longer gentle. It pushed the balloon sideways, and the ropes creaked loudly. He held tightly to the chair. His heart was racing, and his stomach felt strange. For the first time, flying did not feel like fun. It felt dangerous. Stay calm, Daniel whispered. But it was hard to believe. Every gust of wind made the chair swing. Some balloons started losing air. They tilted, pulled, and twisted. The higher he went, the smaller the desert below seemed, and the taller the clouds became. Fear wrapped around him like a cold blanket. What if I fall? What if I can't come down? He closed his eyes for a moment. His hands were shaking. The chair moved sharply, almost tipping over. He opened his eyes and saw the storm coming closer. Lightning flashed in the distance, and the sound of thunder made his heart jump. The wind grew stronger. The balloons were pulling in different directions. Daniel tried to push and pull the ropes to guide them, but it was like trying to control a wild animal. The rain began to fall lightly at first, then faster, hitting his face and making it hard to see. "I can do this. I just need to stay calm." But it was not only the storm. His mind was filled with doubts. "Why am I doing this? I could be at home, safe. Everyone will think I'm crazy. Maybe I should give up." Then he remembered something. He remembered his dream, the years of waiting, the nights imagining the sky, the preparation, the excitement when the balloons lifted him. He took a deep breath and said firmly, "No, I came here to fly. I will not give up." The chair tilted again. The rope stretched. Daniel leaned carefully, trying to balance himself. Water ran down his face. His fingers were cold. The balloons bounced against each other. The sound of tearing rope made him jump. For a moment, Daniel closed his eyes. He imagined the desert below, quiet and safe. He imagined the town he loved, and he imagined the sky, open and endless. Slowly he opened his eyes. The storm was loud, but he felt a new calm inside him. Fear was still there, but courage was stronger. He adjusted the ropes, letting some balloons float higher while holding others tighter. He found small movements that helped him stabilize. The lightning was still far away, but the wind had started to slow. The rain became lighter. The clouds were still gray, but the sky was no longer angry. Daniel's chair stopped swinging wildly. His heart was still beating fast, but he could breathe again. He looked around. The desert was below, safe and quiet. The town was far behind him, small and peaceful. The balloons floated steadily above, still hundreds of them, shining in the soft light. Daniel smiled. Relief washed over him. He had faced the storm. He had survived. He felt stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. For the first time, he understood something important. Flying was not only about happiness and freedom. It was about courage, patience, and believing in yourself even when everything seems impossible. He whispered to himself, "I can do this. I am ready for anything now." The storm had passed, leaving the sky wide and calm again. The sun appeared for a moment, shining through the clouds like a promise. Daniel adjusted his chair and looked ahead. The adventure was far from over, but now he knew he could survive the dangers of the sky. Daniel took a deep breath. His body was tired, his fingers sore from holding the ropes, but his heart was full of joy. He had faced the storm and he had survived. The feeling was amazing, a mixture of relief, pride, and excitement. "I did it," he whispered to himself. "I really did it." But he knew he could not stay in the air forever. He needed to land. Carefully, he looked at the ropes and balloons. He tied some of the extra ropes and slowly let go of a few balloons at a time. The chair began to descend, slowly and safely. Daniel's eyes were wide with focus. One wrong move could make the landing dangerous. Below, he saw a large open field near the edge of the desert. It was perfect, flat and free of obstacles. He guided the chair toward it, feeling every gust of wind. His stomach twisted with fear and excitement. This was the final part of his adventure. The balloons pulled hard, but Daniel stayed calm. Step by step, he adjusted the ropes. Slowly, the chair touched the ground. The balloons bounced slightly, and then, at last, the chair settled safely on the earth. Daniel exhaled, letting his body relax. He laughed, a loud and happy laugh that carried across the field. "I made it!" he shouted. He stood up, stretching his arms to the sky. The wind moved softly, as if congratulating him. Soon, people from nearby towns came to see what had happened. They had heard about the man flying with balloons, and now they wanted to meet him. Some called him crazy, some called him brave. Journalists arrived the next day. Cameras flashed, and microphones were everywhere. Daniel told his story simply: the balloons, the preparation, the fear, and the joy of flying. He talked about the storm and how he stayed calm. Everyone listened carefully. His calm courage impressed them. For weeks, Daniel became famous. People from all over the country talked about him. He received letters, invitations, and even awards. But Daniel did not care about fame. He cared about one thing: the dream he had followed since childhood. Sitting in his backyard at night, Daniel looked at the stars and remembered the first time he had imagined flying. Now he had done it. He had flown hundreds of meters above the ground, faced a storm, and returned safely. The sky was no longer just a dream. It was a part of his life. He smiled and whispered softly to the night, "Sometimes you have to risk everything to touch your dreams. Sometimes you have to fly high to see how beautiful life really is." And with that, Daniel Marsh became more than a man. He became a legend. The man who flew with balloons, who faced danger with courage, and who inspired everyone to believe that dreams are worth chasing no matter how impossible they seem. Above all, Daniel learned the most important lesson. Freedom is not only in flying through the sky, it is in believing in yourself when no one else does. The stars shone brighter that night, as if celebrating a dream realized and a heart brave enough to chase it. And somewhere far above the clouds, Daniel smiled, knowing that adventure is never truly over. It only changes form. And what about you? Do you have a dream which seems impossible? What do you do to make your dream come true one day? Write in the comments. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe for more English stories.